He was just looking for a quiet evening. But the tears of two little girls changed his whole life forever. If this story touched your heart, and if you felt how one man became a father to two children he'd never even met, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Because the stories we tell here aren't just fiction. One day, they might touch your life too. Daniel Carter had built his fortune by staying far away from emotional messes. In his world, clarity, control, and distance were priceless. Getting too close to people meant blurring the lines, and for Daniel, there was nothing more dangerous than uncertainty. That evening, he was alone on the terrace of one of his luxury restaurants, a half-finished glass of cognac in his hand, the glowing city skyline stretching out before him. To the world, he looked like the quiet embodiment of power and success. But inside, he was drowning in silence. He had chosen this spot to be alone. No clients, no guests, no small talk, just the soft clinking of cutlery in the distance and dim lighting around him. But then, something broke through the quiet. A sound that didn't belong. Gentle, barely louder than a whisper, but it hit like a punch to the chest. A child was crying, his brows furrowed. He stood up quietly and walked toward the sound. He moved past the ivy-covered railing toward the side of the building. There by a stone planter, in a hidden corner, two little girls were sitting on the ground, crying and clinging to each other. They looked about 5, almost like twins. Dark curly hair, dirt-covered white dresses, and big blue eyes filled with tears. One of them was clutching a worn-out stuffed bunny. That bunny looked like her last anchor to the world. Daniel slowly crouched down, careful not to scare them. He gently cleared his throat. One of the girls looked up and her eyes were so big and sad, it made his heart skip a beat. "Where are your mom and dad?" he asked softly. The girl holding the bunny blinked. Her voice was barely a breath. "We don't know. Mommy said she was going to get something, but she never came back." Daniel had expected an answer, just not that one. He looked around. No adults. No bag. No clue. It was like these two kids had fallen out of the sky. He asked their names. Lily and Nora, they said. They didn't know their last name or their home address. They had no idea what to do. Something kicked in. He pulled out his phone and called his driver. Told him to bring the car around now. Then he turned back to the girls. "You're coming with me, just until we figure out what's going on. I promise you're safe now." He held out his hand. Lily reached for it first. Her tiny fingers were trembling. Nora followed, hugging her bunny tighter. Daniel gently led them down the steps and into the car. His driver opened the door without a single question. Once inside, Daniel took off his coat and wrapped it around them. They weren't crying anymore, but they weren't talking either. They just stared out the window at the city like it had suddenly become too big and too strange. He took them to one of his downtown hotels. As soon as he said his name at the front desk, no one asked anything. Inside the suite, everything had already been arranged: extra beds, warm food, clean clothes. Lily and Nora walked in quietly, still holding hands. "This is just for tonight," Daniel said, kneeling down to their level. "Tomorrow, we'll figure things out." They didn't answer, but they slowly started exploring the room. The soft lights, the cozy rugs. It was obvious they had never been in a place like this. "Can we sit on the bed?" Lily whispered. Daniel gave a small smile. Of course. He ordered dinner: 2 plates of pasta, chamomile tea, and apple juice. When the food arrived, they didn't touch it at first. Only when Daniel nodded did they start eating, carefully and quietly. Nora handed a piece of bread to her sister before taking one herself. Daniel watched them from across the room. Respectfully, these two little girls had already learned never to take anything for granted. After dinner, he gave them pajamas and space to change in the bathroom. Lily folded her dress and carried it out. Nora still had her bunny in a tight grip. Daniel turned on the night light and pulled back the covers. "You can both sleep here. I'll be in the other room. If you need anything, just come get me." They nodded. Lily lay down first, and Nora curled up beside her. Daniel slipped out, leaving the door slightly open. That night, he barely slept. Sitting on the couch, he called the police, then child services. He gave them the girls' names and explained the situation. But nothing. No reports. No alerts. No trace. It was like these kids didn't exist. And in that moment, something cracked inside him. By the end of that night, Daniel knew one thing for sure. He hadn't just stumbled upon those girls. He had found them, and letting them go was no longer an option. As the first light of morning slipped through the hotel windows, Daniel sat wide awake on the couch, tired but alert. His phone rested in his hand, but his eyes were staring off into the distance. Still nothing in the system. No trace of Lily or Nora. No reports. No one looking for them. It didn't make sense, not in Daniel's world. A world of reports, structure, and control. But this was chaos. These girls weren't just lost. They'd been forgotten. He quietly walked into their room. The girls were curled up under the same blanket, fast asleep, holding each other tight. The worn-out bunny was still between them, like some kind of tiny guardian. Daniel stood in the doorway and just watched. He didn't know why he felt so protective, but the feeling wouldn't leave. He was no longer just helping them, he was starting to become their protector. When breakfast arrived that morning, Lily ate carefully, while Nora looked up and quietly asked, "Can we stay again today?" Daniel nodded without a second thought. "As long as you want." He hadn't told them yet, but sometime after midnight, he had called his legal advisor and started an emergency guardianship application. It wasn't planned, it just felt right. Leaving them now felt like leaving a piece of himself behind. The next day, guided by his attorney, he hired a private investigator. All he had to go on were the girls' names, the date he found them, and their approximate age. He didn't expect much, but he had to try. 2 days later, the phone call came and it changed everything. "There's a name," the investigator said. "Emily Hart. Gave birth to twin girls at a public hospital 6 years ago. Father's section was left blank. No records since. No insurance, no school enrollment. Nothing." Daniel's heart started racing. Emily. That name, like a spark from a forgotten part of his past. She'd come into his life like a storm and vanished just as quickly. But in that short time, she left a mark. Her warm smile, that quiet vulnerability. And then gone. He looked at the report again. Twin girls. Their age, their features. Even the way Lily tilted her head when she was deep in thought, it was exactly like Emily. Daniel's hands trembled. If this report was accurate, Lily and Nora were his daughters. His girls. That night, he sat across from them at the dinner table, just watching. Lily was quiet, thoughtful. Nora was trying to touch her nose with a fork and laughing like it was the best joke in the world. He saw himself in both of them, not just in how they looked, but in their energy, their spark, their silences. After they went to sleep, he opened his laptop and searched through an old folder. There were a few pictures of him and Emily. In one of them, Emily wasn't even looking at the camera, she was looking at him, like she was imagining a future together. He placed that photo side by side with a recent one of the girls. The eyes, the smiles. It was all there. The next morning, he took them to a private clinic under the excuse of a checkup. They drew his DNA and the girls. The results would take a few days. And those few days felt like the longest of his life. He barely noticed time passing. At night, he read parenting books. He spoke with child psychologists. He started setting up a new room for the girls in his penthouse. The hotel suite was no longer enough, he was building them a home. Lily picked blue sheets. Nora chose ones with stars. For the first time in their lives, they were allowed to choose. The look on their faces. It hit Daniel right in the chest. Finally, the day came. The envelope was in his hands. He sat down in the corner of the room and opened it. Just a few lines on the paper. But those few lines changed everything. Probability, 99.99%. Paternity confirmed. They were his. It wasn't just a feeling anymore, it was fact. He walked to their room. They were sitting on the floor, building a house out of wooden blocks. Nora smiled and held up a tiny wooden figure. "This is you," she said. "You're the tallest in the house. And you hold both our hands." Daniel couldn't speak. His throat tightened. He wasn't ready to tell them just yet. But he knew. This wasn't a coincidence. They weren't just part of his life now. They were his family. Daniel didn't tell the girls about the DNA results. He folded the paper neatly and tucked it away in the bottom drawer of his desk. But that paper, those few lines, had already started shaping everything he did. The way he gently brushed Lily's hair. The way he tucked Nora's blanket at night. Even the way he made breakfast in the mornings. He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was their father now. The penthouse had changed too. What started out as a temporary arrangement had slowly turned into something that felt like a home. The girls had started picking out their own pajamas, racing to Daniel's room the moment they woke up. They fought over the TV remote, named all their stuffed animals, scattered puzzle pieces down the hallway, and somehow convinced him to watch cartoons every morning. Sometimes Daniel would just pause and quietly watch them. Lily would hum when she was deep in thought. Nora turned everything, literally everything, into a story. And in those little quirks, Daniel saw pieces of himself. The man who used to obsess over structure and success now found himself emotional over how a 5-year-old held a spoon. One rainy afternoon, the feeling hit deeper. The girls were at the kitchen table, drawing. Daniel sat nearby, his laptop open but his mind somewhere far away. These days, he did most of his meetings from home, pushed the important ones to the evening. For the first time in his life, priorities meant something new. Nora held up her drawing. 3 stick figures, Daniel in the middle, the tallest of them. "This is you," she said proudly. "You're in the middle because you hold both our hands." Lily quietly slid her picture across the table. A house, a tree. Inside, 2 beds, 1 couch, and 3 tiny hearts. Daniel felt his throat tighten. No words could have expressed it better than those drawings. That night, after the girls climbed into bed, Daniel sat between them. For the first time in months, he felt ready to say out loud what he had kept inside. He cleared his throat. His voice was soft. "You know, we've been together for a while now," he said. They both nodded. There was something in their eyes. They could sense this moment was different. "I've been doing everything I can to protect you both," he continued. "I've talked to doctors, experts, and I found out something important. I'm not just the guy who found you. I'm actually your dad. I always was." Silence. Lily furrowed her brows, clearly thinking hard. Nora blinked, then whispered, "But Mommy never told us." Daniel looked down. "I didn't know either. Not until recently. But what I do know is this: it doesn't change anything. I've loved you both from the beginning. And I always will." The silence wasn't cold. It was warm, heavy, full of something real. Nora leaned into him and rested her head on his shoulder. Lily thought for another moment, then asked softly, "Can we still live here?" Daniel's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled. "For as long as you want." That night, for the first time, the girls didn't whisper after the lights went out. They didn't ask questions. They just fell asleep. Daniel sat at the doorway for a long time. There were no more secrets. This wasn't just a place with a roof over their heads. It was home. And the next morning, as they cleared the breakfast plates, Lily looked up and said one word: "Daddy." Just one word. But it meant everything. These days, Daniel woke up at the same time as the girls. He laid out their clothes, braided their hair, and they ate breakfast together at the kitchen table. The man who once hated being late for work didn't complain anymore. These quiet little rituals had become the new center of his life. Every time Nora called him daddy, warmth would echo in his chest. And Lily's quiet trust gave him a deep sense of belonging. But no matter how peaceful things seemed, Daniel had started to feel something shifting in the background. One evening, the phone rang. It was the private investigator he had hired weeks ago, and his voice said everything. This wasn't just another update. "We found Emily," he said. "She's alive. But she's not doing well." Daniel's heart almost stopped. "Emily? Really? Where? What had happened?" The investigator continued. "She's in a clinic. She suffered a mental breakdown. She's not using her real name, but the records match. Doctors say she's been whispering the girls' names, Lily and Nora." Daniel dropped the pen in his hand. Emily hadn't forgotten them. She had just gotten lost inside herself, in her own pain. That night, he didn't tell the girls anything. He tucked them into bed, whispered goodnight, and sat alone in the dark for hours. Thoughts crushed down on him like walls. Emily was alive. She hadn't left them. And one day, the girls might want to see her. But when? And more importantly, how? The next morning, during breakfast, Nora placed her stuffed bunny on the table and proudly gave it a superhero name: Captain Bunny. Lily was quiet, carefully picking at the edges of her toast. Daniel sensed it was the right moment. He spoke gently. "Girls, I need to tell you something important." Both of them looked up at him. Daniel took a deep breath. "Your mom. She's alive. But she's been sick for a long time. She's in a clinic now, getting help. But she didn't forget you. She said your names. She's been thinking about you." Lily's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She just lowered her head. Nora dropped her spoon. "Did she look for us?" she whispered. Daniel took their hands in his. "Yes, and she's getting better. And if you ever want to, one day, we can go see her." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was quiet, thoughtful, like a long-locked door had creaked open inside their minds. That afternoon, Daniel stepped out onto the balcony and called the clinic. He scheduled a visit, not for the girls, not yet. Just him. He needed to see her face, because some answers only Emily could give. On the day of the visit, Daniel dropped the girls off at school like it was any other morning. But their hugs lingered just a little longer. "Daddy, pick us up early," Lily said. Nora turned back and waved twice. The car drove silently toward the edge of the city. The clinic was covered in ivy, quiet and still. A nurse met him at the front. "She's calmer today," she said. She said the girls' names again. "And when we told her you were coming." Her eyes filled with tears. As Daniel walked down the long hallways, his steps grew heavier. His heart was pounding with every step. And then he walked into the room. There she was, Emily, pale, thin, but still recognizable. Her eyes widened the moment they saw him. Her lips moved. Daniel. His name left her lips like a prayer. He walked closer, slowly. "I found them," he said softly. "Lily and Nora. I found them." Emily's face crumpled. Tears fell silently as she covered her face with her hands. Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't try to comfort her or ask questions. He just stood there, present. After a long silence, Emily finally spoke. "I didn't want to leave them. I really didn't. But I was so broken. I couldn't hold myself together anymore. I left them on a bench with a note. I hoped someone would find them. But they vanished. And I collapsed at the pharmacy. They admitted me under a different name. Since then, time just stopped." Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out a photo. Lily and Nora building a stuffed animal fortress, both laughing at the camera. Emily looked at the picture. Her hands trembled, and the tears came again. "They want to see you," Daniel said. "Maybe not yet, but soon." Emily held on to her blanket like it was the last thing anchoring her. "Do I deserve that?" she asked in a whisper. Daniel nodded slowly. "They don't need you to be perfect. They just want you to be real." When Daniel walked out of the clinic, the sky was gray. It hadn't started raining yet, but the heavy air hinted at a coming storm. He stood in the parking lot for a while before getting into his car. Emily's tears, her trembling hands, the way she touched the photo, it all kept replaying in his mind. Forgiving her wouldn't be easy. But one thing was clear now. Emily had never forgotten her daughters. She had just lost herself. When he picked the girls up from school, they ran to him as they always did. But Daniel held them just a little longer than usual. On the ride home, Nora asked from the back seat, "Is our mom still happy?" Daniel looked at her through the mirror. "She didn't smile," he said gently. "But when she touched your photo, she shook. She loves you more than you think." Lily turned her head and whispered, "I want to see her, but only if Nora's with me." Nora grabbed her hand. "I'm always with you." A week later, the doctors said Emily was stable enough for a visit. Daniel suggested they meet at his place, the place where the girls felt safest. The clinic agreed. On the morning of the visit, Daniel made breakfast like always. Lily wore her special dress with the little embroidered flowers. Nora had cleaned her stuffed bunny and carried it proudly. "She'll remember me when she sees this," she said. When the doorbell rang, Daniel went to open it. Emily stood there in a light cardigan, holding no bag, just the weight of everything she'd been through, regret and hope in her eyes. She froze as she stepped into the home. Children's drawings on the walls, toys on the floor, colorful blankets on the couch. "They really live here," she whispered. Lily and Nora stood at the end of the hallway, watching. Daniel didn't say a word. This moment belonged to them. Lily reached for Nora's hand, and together, they walked toward their mother. They stopped right in front of her. There was a pause, a few seconds that stretched like an eternity. Then Nora whispered, "Hi, Mom." Emily slowly dropped to her knees. Tears streamed down her face as she opened her arms but didn't reach. She waited. Lily stepped forward first, wrapping her arms around her. Then Nora leaned in too. The three of them stayed there, quietly holding each other. It wasn't dramatic. It was real, heavy, gentle, healing. Later, they sat together in the living room drinking tea. Emily looked at the girls' drawings, asked about the names of their stuffed animals. She didn't try to explain the past. She didn't make excuses. She simply asked, "What's your favorite book now? Do you still like that moon song?" Daniel only stepped in when needed. He wasn't just a spectator in this scene, he was their anchor. The girls kept glancing at him. His presence meant safety. As Emily was leaving, Nora held out her bunny. "Bring it back next time," she said. Emily tried not to cry again. Daniel walked her to the elevator. Just before she stepped in, she turned to him with teary eyes. "You saved them," she said. "I couldn't. But you became everything." Daniel nodded. "They don't need perfect. They just need real. If you can be that, it's enough. When the door closed, the house was quiet. But not with tension, with peace. The girls were curled up on the couch, heads resting against each other. There was no confusion in their eyes, just the tiredness that comes from being brave. Daniel sat between them. Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. Nora stretched out her feet and asked softly, "We're still together, right?" Daniel closed his eyes and nodded. Always. Months passed. Emily slowly became part of their lives again. She visited a few days a week, took the girls to the park, baked cakes with them, told stories while hanging laundry. But she never tried to take Daniel's place. They had become a team, not because of a court order, but because of trust. One spring day at the park, Emily brought an old photo album. A few faded baby pictures, warm and blurry. Lily pointed to the last empty page and asked, "Can we put some new ones here too?" Emily smiled. "That's exactly what I was hoping." That night, when Daniel checked on the girls' room, there was a new photo frame hanging on the wall, all of them together. Below it, a shiny word cut from glitter letters written by Nora. Family. Daniel had once conquered the business world, reached the top as a CEO. But this was a different kind of summit. Here, success was a smile. Victory was two kids sleeping peacefully. This story had no heroes. Only people who stayed, who rebuilt, who forgave, and somehow, through all the cracks, became whole again. That's why this story is unforgettable. If this story touched your heart, and if you felt how one man became a father to two children he'd never even met, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Because the stories we tell here aren't just fiction. One day, they might touch your life too.